Good morning, Eyal. Thank you for joining us today, and thank you everyone for joining us. So, how's things over in Georgia today?
Things are a little bit foggy, to be honest, but generally speaking, everything is great. Thanks for having me here today.
So, really, we're here today to talk about security. We've got a lot of clients on. We set up this webinar. I think we have quite a few joint clients, and you guys have a lot of clients, and we have a lot of clients who are all trying to solve their security problems, all trying to figure out how do they harden their environment, how do they stop ransomware, how do they stop phishing attacks? Because one thing for certain, all of these are getting worse. So, I just want to have a conversation about this, and hopefully we can learn some stuff, and everyone enjoys the session today. Maybe if we want to get started, we can start off with this concept of what should we have in our security stack? How should we be thinking about security? So now this is something we put together because my opinion about security. There's more than one way to skin a cat, but sometimes they're not all the most efficient ways. So I came up with this concept of, look, there's three ways to potentially stop threats, and that is the human way, the detection way, and the control way. Obviously, most threats in theory could be stopped with the human way, but I don't know what your thoughts are about the practice of that, Eyal.
So the way we see the human element, like it's a very important component and a must-have in everyone's kind of defense strategy. But obviously, we can't rely on humans only to detect. In our case, bad emails, or always trust humans to make the right decision, the right security decision in 100% of the cases. This is why we believe that we need to augment them and provide them not just with the knowledge, not just with the awareness, but with the right tools to do, or to be empowered to do the right things in the right time. Because believe it or not, some of the humans inside the organization are capable, are willing, and are sometimes even very motivated to help the organization stay secure.
So I think a perfect example of the human. We do cybersecurity training for all of our staff. We do repeated training. They enroll. We do phishing samples. We do various other tests on our staff to see who are the weakest points in the company. And we're a cybersecurity company, so most of the people here are relatively aware of what they should do and shouldn't do. But a couple of months ago, I dropped an executable into our general channel on Teams. And I told everyone they need to run it on their computers urgently. And I sent it from my Teams account. I'm the CEO of the company. People want to respond and they want to do what I say. But I was surprised how many people tried to run that file. Now, it couldn't run. We have controls in place to stop it running. But I wanted to see how many people would try to run it. And I was really surprised by the amount of people that immediately clicked on, oh, Danny sent us something, it must be good. Not thinking for 1 minute, why would the CEO send me an executable? Maybe his phone was stolen. Maybe his computer was compromised. Hopefully these things don't happen because we've got lots of controls in place, but nobody questioned. They had that much trust in the system security. They didn't question, should I do this? Should I question it? Should someone call Danny? And over 20% of our staff actually attempted to run that file, which was somewhat concerning. And I think we see the same in phishing attempts all the time. People get trained, they see phishing all the time, and people still click on the links.
Right, it's a great example. I think in the Microsoft Teams example, people trust collaboration tool because it's considered more secure. It's behind, we have authentication. Email is considered much less secure. So I want to assume that if you try the same kind of exercise via email, your click rate or participation rate will be much lower. And you mentioned, I think it's an interesting point that you are doing this kind of phishing exercise. We are doing the same. We're doing it for our customers as well. It's part of what we are doing. But the reason we are running phishing exercise is not necessarily to detect the weakest links. We want to detect the strongest link inside the organization, the one that will click on the button and say, hey, I've been phished. I don't think this email belongs in my inbox. And again, because we believe that humans are a very important source of real-time threat intelligence. And it happens more than once that one of our customers told us, you know what, one of our users actually saved us from a phishing attack. None of the controls that we have in place were able to detect the bad email or the bad attachment, whatever was the case. And at the end of the day, it was the user that saved the day. So if we keep trying to look for the weakest links inside of our organization, we will always find them. Even with IRONSCALES, people that our team that is doing anti-phishing solution are clicking on phishing exercises sometimes. But if you kind of change your mindset and you try and detect the champions, the top 10% of the organization that can quickly report back, then you can do something about it. And I'm sure that you can talk more about the fact that, like, if someone clicked on an exec, it's not the end all be all. There is still some time to fix it.
Well, I think the other thing as well is, I mean, understanding, and you made a point that Teams is considered secure. It doesn't accept outside messages. In some respects, though, it has some really basic fundamental flaws where you can send executables with no restrictions and things like that around on it. Where it is secure is great, but I think we're going to talk a little bit about email as well, about how people get in and create footholds in the system. But if someone was able to get malware running on somebody's computer, they now have access to their Teams account. And that's where, one of my previous positions was really just trying to get into companies. I'd charge people to see if we could break into their system and get certain amounts of data. And it was very hard to get the people to click on something who had control of the data sometimes. From an external source. But what you could do is you could get onto the front desk, or you could get onto someone else's computer. And then from there, you were able to spread by using things like Teams and internal switching files out on network shares. Of course, detection is where a lot of people put their money. It's where they say, okay, the human way we train, we want to know who's better. We want to reduce our probabilities. And it's not so much about finding the weakest link and saying, oh, you're the weakest link, but finding the weakest link and understanding how can we remedy this issue? Because if we can say, okay, look, I know that 20% of my users will click on an executable that comes through Teams. I'm going to tell everyone that was a really bad thing to do. We're going to reduce our probability. So if we run the same test in a year, we might get 10%. But we also need to think about, well, what can I do to remedy that using either detection or controls? Talking about detection, that's where I believe you operate a lot in the email world, where we're thinking about spam and phishing and things like that. Antivirus, looking for potential threats. What's your thoughts on types of detection that you should be putting in your environment?
So one of the main things that we are kind of doing these days is stop focusing a little bit around the threat and focus more around intent and behavior. We are doing, we are an anti-phishing email security company, so we are trying to stop the bad emails. And the way we see things is that, even in a ransomware attack, someone need to convince one of the people in your organization to click, to open the attachment or to download something and do something. And we know, and my background, I was a malware analyst, reverse engineer, and I was studying for a lot of time how these guys are doing these kind of things and bypassing detection and stuff like that. And I realized that there will always be this kind of next zero day. There is always be this next thing that will pass detection, that will pass kind of threat-based detection. But there is one thing that we can do better in order to stop that, and is detecting malicious intent. Okay, so because the email will have to say something like, hey, here is the invoice that you need to pay, or your account is about to expire. And by detecting the bad language or the malicious fraudulent language, we can basically be able to make a determination that the file, the attachment is bad, or the link is bad, even if we can't find any indication of compromise inside these files or behind those URLs. So focusing on intent, on behavior, on finding anomalies, and not necessarily identifying and detecting threat is becoming a very important component, especially in email security and Microsoft Teams security communication, and any communication channel that we're using out there.
So what we're saying here then is, rather than just relying on, hey, this is a bad URL, which could be in your web filter or could be in your email filter, you're saying, let's look at the content and the language to increase our ability to detect something that's bad. So that we found this is a phishing link because it profiles other potential bad indicators, like please update your details, or here's an invoice, those type of scenarios.
You have to ask two questions, is this email known to be bad, which means the sending IP, the sender, the file, the attachment, whatever, but it's not enough. You need to be able to ask another question. Is this email is actually a good email? And how do we know good? We know good by profiling what is trusted behavior looks like. So if Danny and Eyal are trading emails, and Danny is normally sending from the ThreatLocker account and Eyal from the IRONSCALES account, this is a trusted communication that the system needs to learn to identify. And if someone all of a sudden is creating a Danny account on Hotmail, Gmail, Yahoo, whatever, and is trying to communicate or impersonate you and try and get something, the system should be able to flag it and say, hey, we know what a trusted communication looks like. This is an anomaly. This is something that we've never seen before. so we don't trust the content as well, or we treat the content with a greater suspiciousness.
Now, the third area when we're thinking about building security, and we're talking a lot about phishing and email at the moment, but we also have to think about the same scenario as malware. If I send that malware via email, or if I send it via a Teams message, that the human shouldn't open the malware. We're thinking about detection being, we're going to look for these bad things. We're going to profile this email. We're going to try and determine if it's bad or good based on that. The third area is this area of controls, which is where really ThreatLocker plays mostly. And it's the idea of, at some point you have to accept that users are going to do something and there's a possibility that it won't get detected. So we have to put controls in place. We have to say, well, we're going to have dual factor authentication on our email. So if someone does get phished, their password isn't going to be useful. Or we're going to have application allowlisting or whitelisting that says don't allow software to run unless it's needed to run. And that's where, when you think about building security out, these three angles are very different ways to stop a threat. The control angle is very much black and white. It's the firewall doesn't open this port unless this port's needed. Software can't run if this isn't needed. Dual factor authentication requires someone to press a button regardless of that. Whereas the detection and the human tend to be a little bit more nuanced, and you have to find products that use all of the data, ML and other things. So I don't know if you mind advancing, Gabby, so we can maybe let Eyal go on, talk a little bit about how IRONSCALES works.
Yeah, so as mentioned, I think it's not a surprise to anyone. Like, most of the cyber attacks out there, especially the successful one, are starting with a phishing email. Actually, it's more than 90%. So evidently, it's the number one or the main vehicle that cyber criminals and threat actors are using in order to drive malware or phishing or bad stuff inside for organization. If you look at ransom alone, and Danny, I'm sure you can have comment on that as well. Most of the phishing is basically, or most of the ransom is actually originated from phishing email, and the average cost for the typical ransomware attack there is growing rapidly. Now it's around $4.5 million, which is a lot.
Well, and I think the point on the phishing email is yeah. So people don't often understand this is, of course, you're not going to open an email attachment and your whole system's going to get ransomed. What's going to happen is you're going to open an email and someone's going to get a foothold onto your machine or onto your network or into your Office 365. And then what they're going to do is they're going to distribute malware through other ways. So one of the examples we've seen is someone will get into your Office 365 account and they'll start switching shared files out. And we actually did a demonstration on this the other day, how easy it was. So they'll say, oh, there's an Excel file here in your OneDrive that's shared to your whole company. Let me switch that out to an executable that has an Excel icon that actually opens the original file so the user doesn't know. And then when the user clicks on that file, they've now got a foothold on your machine. So what might seem like a harmless, oh, well, you just gave away your password, someone could send emails from you. No, it's not, because they can get into your OneDrive, they can get into your Teams, they can change other things in your environment that allows them to move around and execute ransomware in other ways.
It's a great point. And back to the discussion on controls, obviously, it means that we need to have kind of post delivery or post like effect controls to be able to remediate these kind of situations. We need to automate them as much as we can, because there is always time to fix with the phishing email, with the ransom. If we have the right detection and controls in place, we can go and fix it. I think the other thing that is important to mention on the phishing, that obviously ransomware is one very big kind of problem that phishing is being used to deliver. But business email compromise, the fake invoices, the fake wire requests, the fake cars, and all these kind of fraudulent attempts to get money out of companies without, sometimes they send an email with no link and no attachment, or they send an attachment, but it's not a malicious one, just one that it's just fake. Like the bank account inside the invoice is different. This problem is growing exponentially. We consider in the last 5 years, companies lost 43 billion. It's an FBI report, $43 billion. So obviously ransom and BCs are top mind for every CISO that I'm speaking with out there these days.
Yeah, and I think last year, if I recall rightly, it was over $10 billion, which is more than the entire size of the endpoint security market. So exactly. Think about the entire value of the endpoint security market. There's more money being paid out in ransoms than is being paid out to endpoint security companies in costs, which is somewhat terrifying.
And going exponentially. I think that both with ransom and BC, these problems are just increasing and increasing over time, and it's not a linear kind of shape. It's more exponential shape, which is
and also growing into corners we didn't see. I mean, if we think about ransomware at the beginning, at first we saw this targeting big companies, then we saw this cheap ransoms, and then we saw the $500 payouts, and then we saw, oh, we can do that. Because what they can do is it started off that they'll target certain companies, and then they'll do like these blanket ransoms, which let's just almost like the viral approach on ransomware. Let's get $500 from as many people as we can. And then they said, oh, we can actually distribute footholds to as many people as we can, not necessarily distribute ransomware, but distribute as many footholds as we can. And then see if we can get 500, rather than getting $500, we're going to just use that foothold to then go in after the big payout. We're going to encrypt everything. We're going to destroy their networks. We're going to spread throughout. We're going to steal their data and upload it. And all of the, it's gone from this like, oh, we're just going to send to as many people to now we're going to get as many footholds. And you might not even know that someone's on your system. They're running malware. They're sneaking around for days or weeks before it happens. And quite often it happens in a long holiday weekend. And as we come into the holiday season again, we tend to see more and more ransomware over the Christmas, over Thanksgivings, over New Year, where people are at home, they're having a drink, they're not really paying attention. People are less likely to report my files are corrupted.
So we talked about it, like the importance of beating the clock and rapid detections here. And obviously we know that we cannot just scan one and assume that the file or the link are safe. We need to kind of adopt this continuous detection mindset and controls in place. We need to be we are able to cluster many similar attacks, because we know that, especially with ransom, but not only, like there's a lot of polymorphism and metamorphism that is being used by cyber criminals, so they can take the same ransom kind of instance and just redo it in many different forms and shapes that will bypass detections and will create some more load on security and threat hunters out there. So it's important that we'll be able to automate and cluster things and make them one incident and not 1,000 incidents in most cases. And again, the focus on content and intent, like, there is no way we can detect 100% of the malware, but we can increase our chances to detect bad files and ransom and malware and others by detecting bad intent inside, in our case, the email phishing or the message that is being sent. And for that, we have basically three main pillars in order to achieve that. The use of machine learning, obviously, in order to do this kind of profiling and look for malicious intent and look for basically anomalies inside communication channels and patterns, Microsoft Teams, emails, Slack, you name it. The HI component, which is our human intelligence, this is where security is coming and the security awareness is coming into play. This is where building the right or changing behavior and building the right security culture inside our organization is very, very important. And the security automation and orchestration, obviously we need to be able to automate decision being made. We need to automate and run like automated playbooks in order to make sure that we can quickly go and fix things before the damage is being done. And if you put an AI in the center of everything, like in the intersection of all these kinds of three, you can basically have a powerful, automated, fast, smart detection that can find anomalies, correlate it with what is reported by users, and trigger automated response in order to reduce the risk. So basically, in order to maintain the control and beat the clock, we need auto remediations and auto thresholds. Like, we need to make sure that our teams are not jumping on every smoke or flag out there. We need to make sure that they're focused only the things that can really be a potential danger to the organization. We need to join hands. And one of the things that we are pitching very, very hard out there is that companies need to come together and do collaborative threat hunting in order to find the 0 days or beat the clock or be able to remediate them before they're doing any harm or damage. Take this kind of communal crowdsource approach for threat hunting, and obviously make it easy for the security team so they can detect and remediate stuff on the go wherever they are. They don't need to sit in front of their desk all day long in order to be able to take care of the things that we see. So some common mistakes that we are seeing there, I think, Danny, you touched on one of them, obviously, the phishing simulation training, or the simple ones, kind of giving us this false sense of security. Like, we are phishing our users, we see the click rates going down from 20% to 10%, and we feel good about ourselves. But at the end of the day, we are just challenging them with the too easy scenarios, which can act as a double-edged sword. Don't know if you want to touch on it as well.
Well, I think that's it, isn't it? I mean, the problem is with phishing simulations as well, is they're trying to take the most common types of phishing attacks, and they're essentially using that to say, I'm going to send this out and this out and this out and this out. And then their goal is to do two things. One is show, I mean, as a vendor, if you're selling anti-phishing training, you want to do two things. One is you want to show up as many people as possible. And then the other thing is you want that chart to look better. Because if it's not looking better, the company says, well, look, I paid $20,000 for this. Why am I still paying for this? Because guess what? We keep telling our users they're wrong and they keep clicking on the links. All we know is 20% of our employees that we don't want to fire aren't very good. So quite often when you're thinking about training software, you think, well, it's looking better. It's looking better. You feel the sense of, oh, well, I'm doing great because our chart's getting better. And then they'll throw something new in there and then that chart will get better as well. So when you do that, you have to think about, well, this isn't covering every possible scenario. This isn't covering someone getting into Teams and sending an executable. This isn't covering someone drafting a new type of phishing email that anyone hasn't seen before. And they're the things that are going to bite you in the ass, to be honest. They're the things that are going to sting, because someone's going to say, well, I've never seen a phishing email before that tells me that there's vouchers from their team lead. Okay, they probably have, or they've never seen a phishing email saying, oh, please register for a parking link at the new office. So, I mean, here's an example. We moved to the new office and we sent DocuSigns out. Everyone had to sign to get their parking link, but people are expecting that. So if an attacker got smart, they could send that same thing out during that week and people are more likely to be exposed. So it does give a naive sense of security when you see that chart saying, hey, your employees are getting smarter, but there's always something that they don't think about.
So exactly. So we say make it hard, make it real, and assume that the failing rate will remain pretty high, like 15 to 20% is what we see out there normally. But use it as a way to detect the people that you can trust, the people that you do want to be part of. Like even we see them as your extended SOC team in some cases, because these people can sometimes help to save the day, and it should not be kind of underestimated. Banner fatigue is something that we see, like, companies doing this email coming from an external source. Be careful with it. Guys, our brain is kind of trained to at some point start ignoring them. If you want to show your users banner, show them contextual banner, tell them why this specific email is something that they need to look deeper into, because banner fatigue is a real problem. Back to the naive sense of security, besides simple phishing attacks and stuff like that, sometimes people think that because we have put all these kind of controls around them, they're secure. We think it's a problem. They need to understand that all the controls and all the detections that we're putting around them can fail at the end of the day, and they need to stay alerted and be aware that something can get to them at the end of the day, and the importance of them being kind of an active part of that, and make it easy for them to be part of the security strategy. Make sure they know what's the expectation, where to find things, and how to do things. Like, if you got a phishing email, what are you supposed to do? Open a help desk ticket, call someone, forward the email. Do you have an easy report phishing button in your Outlook or Gmail to report with? So don't make it complicated on your users. Make sure that you are sending the right message about their role and their part in the organization security, and do what Danny is doing. Put an exe file in Teams and make the hard test, make the hard simulations in order to make sure that they are prepared for the real world scenarios.
So a couple of questions come in. One I think is more of a statement, but I'll mention it. One is remediation training has always got its ways of motivating people to pay more attention. So I'll agree to that, because one of the things, I know as a tech engineer, if I get a link in my email and I click on that and the link basically says, I'm looking at my phone, I've got a link from UPS and it's saying, "I'll track your order." Now I know that if I click on that link, it's not phishing me just by clicking on the link. Now I know if that link comes from KnowBe4, I'm going to get a slap in the face and get told I've got to go and do the training. So what happens is, now sometimes it annoys me because it's really hard to see the source of the link. It's really hard to copy and paste the link on the iPhone. So I'm sitting there going, I'm not even going to open this. But people get so alert to, well, what could this link do, that they get terrified. And they end up inspecting every link, which is good, because if people are inspecting every link, they're more likely to see things. The problem is some people actually don't know how to interpret if something's good or bad. So, I mean, for me, I can tell the difference between the beginning of a URL saying Microsoft.com and being the domain name, and the end of the URL saying, "Oh, I've got this random bad.com /Microsoft.com." And a user, as a tech guy, you probably think, well, that's obvious, that's not going to Microsoft. But if you think about a user who's didn't grow up in the IT era, who started using computers when they were 40 years old or 35 years old or even 50 years old, then that's a little bit harder for them to suddenly say, well, it said it was Microsoft, and I don't understand why it doesn't say, because and their job might not be technical. So you've got to understand that it's difficult for them to understand what they're looking at, even when you say, look at the URL first, that they might not see. It might be really simple for you, but it might not be for them. So I think, somebody's asked for us to actually give a little bit about our backgrounds on here as well. So Eyal, do you want to go first and just talk a little bit about your background, and then I'll follow on from you?
Yeah, so before starting IRONSCALES, I was a security researcher, malware analyst, and reverse engineer, working for a couple of Israeli cybersecurity companies. And before that, what I call in my prior life, I was a software engineer, tech lead, and team lead. So doing lots of Java and Python programming, and some reversing.
So, and just a little bit about my background. I started my career in corporate IT, which at the time wasn't really security. There was no security back then. And because I worked at a corporate headquarters of a large multinational company that liked to acquire companies, and we suddenly joined all these networks together, and I was the only IT in the corporate headquarters, very quickly I became corporate security, because it was, oh, well, if someone gets malware on this network, it affects this network and this network, and there was no other corporate IT. So I learned very quickly the risks of not having good security, especially when you join 146 sites together from various acquisitions. And, I started building centralized email and email security and web security and firewalls and MPLS networks, and then antivirus and things like that started coming into play a lot. I then actually went on to the email security world, which is, I feel bad for Eyal, because I feel like that was the hardest job I ever did, because, we had 14 antiviruses and we could never detect everything. And someone was always unhappy that they got something or they didn't get something. So, and then really from there, I turned into two jobs for quite a few years. I did. One was trying to break into companies. So I would get engaged by companies, by hospitals, by finance companies, say, hey, we need to check our security. And the problem they always had is they thought, Danny's going to find a way of getting in here, and then we're going to fix it, and then we're going to be good. They didn't really understand, even when they did that I need to step back and think of this more logically and start hardening my environment. But I'd go in and they'd say, try and get in. So I would write malware sometimes. I would use phishing campaigns. I'd use rubber duckies to go into a hospital and plug something in the back of a computer and get a foothold. But I would essentially break into a company, and I would get their data out. And then the other thing I was doing at the same time, which ended up being 70% of what I was doing, and this was pre-founding ThreatLocker, was ransomware recovery. I just get bought in over and over again. Tell us how we can get this. In the early days of ransomware, and actually still today, but in the early days especially, people didn't like to always give your data back when you paid. So people would pay the $20,000 and then they wouldn't get their data. And it never used to be $1 million. And it was then a case of, well, what can we do to get our data back? And it was sometimes not a nice conversation. I think just to move on a little bit and to give everyone a little bit idea of ThreatLocker, I want to do this in the case of two case studies. So the first one is Anatomy IT, who formerly ICE Technologies. ThreatLocker is an endpoint security tool. So for those who don't know and who's just joining us on the call, but we're not an endpoint security tool that focuses on detection at all. And we can work independently, or we can replace your EDR if you want us to work independently and replace, or we can work alongside your EDR or your MDR or whatever you have. Our goal is to block malware, but the way we do this is we allow the software you need, because malware, ransomware is still just software, and then we block everything else. So if you're only allowing good software and then blocking everything else, it means if someone gets into your environment, if someone downloads an email attachment, if someone clicks on that link in Teams, if someone gets into Kaseya and pushes out ransomware and there was a vulnerability, or WannaCry in 2017, it can't run because it's not on your trusted list. And I want to talk about this client a little bit. They onboarded with us recently enough, and they had a great onboarding experience. This is their testimonial, so I'll go on to a little bit more if we go through what their problem statement was. So this is the big challenges the customer had. Users were constantly downloading things on their computers without authorization, and a lot of that was miscellaneous things like coupon clippers and PDF readers, but it was also malware and other botnets and spyware and free Chinese software, and they had a big struggle with this. And they were struggling to keep up with their endpoint security needs. They'd gone from antivirus to more advanced antivirus to more advanced antivirus, and to find that it's not necessarily always successful. And they couldn't keep up with the attack. I mean, the healthcare industry is one of the most attacked industries. I don't think it's the most attacked. I think it's the most compromised for two reasons. One is, and this is my opinion, so that my partner might have a different opinion, is they have a lot of doctors who fit into that category of, I didn't start using a computer until I was 40. And that makes them nurses and people who have been in healthcare, went to college to learn how to care for people, and then are suddenly sold, oh, you do all this on a computer. So they fall into that. And then also the value of healthcare data in a ransomware attack is huge. So when they do get attacked, they are more likely to have to pay to stop their data going on the net. And this partner of ours just felt out of control with what can I do. What they did with ThreatLocker is they essentially deployed our agent. We learned the software they use in their environment, and then they were able to put policies in place to only allow that software to run. They saw a full audit of everything that's running in their environment. So every document, every DLL, every file that's moved and copied to a USB drive was audited. Every execution, who it was signed by, what process called it, is logged there. And then if they wanted to bring new executables into their environment, new DLLs that weren't already allowed, then it got stopped. Here's a statement. Anatomy IT is more confident in their endpoint security, stating that if they had just one solution, if they're only allowed to choose one solution for their endpoints, they would keep ThreatLocker and get rid of the rest. And that is not, I mean, we coexist with CrowdStrike, we coexist with SentinelOne, we coexist with many security products. But when you think about endpoint security, if you think about, I've got a choice between only allowing what I need or trying to find the bad guys, you always want to choose what you need. And finally, their statement was that Anatomy IT offers a more robust endpoint security tool now, that they bundle ThreatLocker with an EDR solution that replaced their antivirus. So they did keep their ADR, and they're running their threat detection alongside the zero trust endpoint security, only allowing the software they need. And that's it. Now, the other thing, before we go into Journey Technologies, because I want to talk about what they did a little bit more, and that was recent. So ThreatLocker has 5 components. One is we only allow software that needs to run. That is the most efficient way of stopping ransomware, period. But there's a lot of weaponization of existing tools in Windows. So if we think about Microsoft Office being allowed to run and PowerShell being allowed to run, you can literally upload all the data from your computer using a PowerShell command without any malware needing to run. You can use PowerShell to run Red Rabbit or run DLL or RegServe or something along those lines. I don't know if you've got any opinions on this too, Eyal, but there's lots of other tools that can be used in your environment that aren't just malware.
Yeah, I think essentially everything that is running in your environment and you don't want to run inside your environment is definitely something that you are trying to keep out. But yeah, not all malware are created equally or trying to achieve the same thing. Not all the malware is targeting the organization. Some malware is targeting the user. So we need to take these things into consideration as well.
Yeah. So now this fileless malware that's weaponizing tools on your computer, whether it's PowerShell or whether it's RegServe and misusing it, or just vulnerable software. So to give an example, SolarWinds Orion was actually a backdoor built into SolarWinds Orion. Now, whenever you run software on your computer, that software can see all of your files. So if you're the CFO, even if you're not a local admin, and you open Angry Birds one day, Angry Birds can see all of the financial for the company. Now, I'm not saying they're going to, and I'm not saying they're going to look at it, but if that software is either weaponized in the case of PowerShell many times, or Red Server or UnDLL, or compromised, it can then eat your data. Now, if you go onto your computer, you'll probably find there's about 500 executable programs that you can run on your machine, even in a clean environment, just things in Windows, PC Paint, all of these executables. So all of those, if got weaponized or compromised against you, could see all of your data. Your Logitech support app, which was made in Taiwan, and all of those other things. Now, that's not to say these guys are putting bad things in there, but if they don't code it and if there's a bug, it can be compromised. So what we do in addition to allowing what can run, we allow control what it can do. So you go down from 500 programs that can see your data to 5 programs that can see your data. And we do that in many cases automatically, recommended programs. We know Zoom doesn't need to go onto your network shares, even though it needs to run and we trust it. It's great. We're using it now. We don't trust it to go on our network shares. We know Office doesn't need to call PowerShell. We know SolarWinds Orion didn't need to reach out to the internet. So by putting those policies in place, we're able to foil those attacks from happening. Now, this customer here, they used ThreatLocker for something slightly different. They did use the Allowlisting. They blocked all untrusted software. They use the Ringfencing. They use our storage. They use our file auditing. They even use our administrative permissions so they can stop users being admins and only allow certain programs to run as admins. But there's another component that they used, Jern, which was the network access control. So the network access control essentially is an endpoint firewall. We have to recognize today that our perimeter has kind of disappeared. We're roaming, we're going home, we're on IoT networks. There's so many devices, and you publish things on the internet and you access servers. So what they did is they enabled our endpoint firewall on all of their devices, and then what they did is they said, okay, we're not going to allow any inbound traffic. Which, by the way, just because you think your IT guys won't open up RDP on their laptop at home, they do. So you can see all of that in one log. But the next thing that is, they said, well, look, I've got a server published on the internet. It's actually a ConnectWise Automate server. And I'm concerned that if there's a vulnerability in that server, someone can gain access to all of my customers. Now, all of their customers are running ThreatLocker. They're all secure. The ConnectWise server is patched and has no known vulnerabilities, but they're really worried about it. After the July 4th weekend, 2021, when Kaseya got compromised and MSPs got hit pretty bad, they wanted to make sure they were secure. So what they did is they installed our NAC on their server and said, I'm going to create something called a dynamic ACL. So, and I apologize if I'm going at this in too much detail, but a dynamic ACL is, think about this. You got a server, you want to publish it on the internet. So you open up port 443 and you say, okay, my server's now on the internet. The whole world can see my server. Well, the alternative is two. One is you create a VPN and then your VPN could be exploited, or you open up the server only to certain IP addresses. The problem is in a case like this, those IP addresses are dynamic because people move around, people's laptops move around, they go home, they get different IP addresses. So what Jern Technology did is they opened up the ThreatLockers, they installed NAC, they opened up that server, and then they used NAC to say only my trusted clients using a dynamic ACL can access this port. And they were able to essentially take their publicly facing RMM server off the internet and harden it. So if someone did get malware, they wouldn't be able to do it. Now, this is their kind of overhead on a challenge. They had a client who fell victim to TrickBot. It was a Word macro document, came through an email, like you said, Eyal, and they had over a week of downtime for that customer. That's when they actually went out looking for ThreatLocker, and they actually hunted us down rather than us selling to them. And they found the solution, and they felt like there was too many threats that antiviruses and EDR couldn't stop. They were running an EDR beforehand, and they took ThreatLocker to solve that problem. Now, they no longer just rely on an antivirus. We help them, Jern Technology, not just rely on security awareness training. Back down to that point, it's not about punishing users that click on the links all the time. It's about understanding your threat. If people are going to click on executables in Teams, put something in place so they can't open executables. If people are going to give their password on phishing, put dual factor authentication in place, understanding what your users' weaknesses are so you can put controls in place to mitigate them. And in addition to this, they actually managed to win a significant amount of business because ThreatLocker was in the security step. They're able to deal with various compliance needs and things like that.
Some questions. Maybe you want to try and answer some of them?
Yeah. So we got Christopher Wald. The goal is to change behavior, which is why always going to be an ongoing improvement effort. There will be risk of users fail or just don't get it. Which detections or preventions are important to minimize the risks posed by zombie users? So I think, Eyal, do you want to go first on that?
Um, I think it's a good problem, but again, you can't expect all your users to be like to act the same or to respond the same to training, or even to kind of like all your attempts or the CISO attempts to change behavior. Just and just make sure you know who are the users or the zombie users or the users that you want to kind of put some more protection on. But more important than that, detect the ones that are not. Okay, detect the ones that that can be more active and can basically build a wall or a protection around your zombie users, your easy clickers, the users that that need some more attention or more support on the security front.
Okay. And I just add to that. Look, there's 3 ways to stop any threat. We started with this security triangle at the beginning. Train your users. Don't expect perfect outcome. Implement detection, good quality detection. Put a good email security system in them. If you realize that most of the threats are coming in via email, put a good email security system in place. Put some kind of detection on your machines, but put controls in place. At the end of the day, you have to accept that some users are just going to click on phishing links. What can I do to mitigate that threat? And that is put good email detection in place and put dual factor authentication in place. The other person answered with the I love you.vbs. And when we think about human behavior not getting better, it is getting better. And you know why? Because a third of the world's business computers were infected with the I love you virus in 2000 or 2001. And it was a VBS file that said, I love you. I think the world has got smarter because most people wouldn't click on that anymore. So the world was a lonely place back then. So somebody asked a question about ThreatLocker, about are there any use cases to read or get an idea of what to expect? There are loads of use cases. There's use cases on our YouTube channel, there's use cases on Facebook, but this is what I would actually tell you to do more than anything. Sign up for a free POC. Put it in monitor mode first, because before you even go into secured mode, we can simulate your environment and we can show you what you would expect to be blocked and what you're going to get blocked if you were to go live. You can simulate for a few weeks and say, this is what would be blocked over that period of time. And then if exceptions need to be made, that can be done. Everyone's environment is different. If you're a software development house, it's a little bit harder to get zero trust working than if you're a law firm that uses Office, Chrome, Edge, and Windows, in which case it's really easy to get working. But put it in trial, deploy the agent, learn what's happening, and see what it looks like in your environment. That's the best way to deal with that. I think I answered this one already. Somebody asked about the living off the land attacks, where it's good that softwares were blocked. And that really comes to ring fencing the app so it can't step outside its lane. I already went through that. I don't know if you want to add anything there, Eyal.
No, nothing to add on that front. So the one question is, which product have you noticed MSPs find more critical in their security stack? I would say definitely endpoint and email security. I would add to that we see MSPs kind of leaning more toward API-based solution, easy to deploy, easy to manage, multi-tenant, obviously, that can support all the customers. We are working with 1,400 MSPs at the moment, and endpoint and email are the number one. And they're looking for solutions that are force multipliers at the end of the day, how they can do more with the small teams that they have at the moment, how they can serve more customers, how they move away from legacy solutions that requires a long installation process that requires lots of management time and attention, setting policies and doing all these kind of things that they simply don't have time to do anymore.
So yeah, I think that's fair. Endpoint and that's where most of your threats are going to happen. And then also just good hygiene. Don't leave your ports open on your firewalls. That's not a product. It's just make sure an MSP, part of your job should be checking your customers' firewalls, making sure they're configured right. I think if you do those 3 things, you're going to be in good case. So somebody's asked a question, and I'm not sure if the intent is updates or if they're a software developer. It's a dev themselves. So would ThreatLocker cause a lot of headache if the company is constantly developing their software and it's never going to be the same hash? So I'm going to answer that as 2 questions. One is if a company's software is constantly updating and the hash is constantly changing. The first part of that is there's a good chance we track those updates for you. So ThreatLocker tracks over 2,500 apps, every Windows update, every Office update, every Chrome update, and every update for software that I've never even heard of in many cases. So we track it for you. So if you have a policy for Zoom, for example, and Zoom releases an update, you don't have to worry about it. The other area is even if we don't track it, you can create custom rules. Like if it's signed by this person, then it can run. If this updater service created it, then it can run. And you will see that during your simulation. Now, if you're talking about a developer themselves using Visual Studio, it comes back down to the same question. Generally, if you're talking about hardcore software developers, you loosen the policies a bit so the software can run. Maybe it can't do anything. Well, you generally do that during your onboard. In our case, what we say is, hey, you can run ThreatLocker tray.exe because of the developer who's developing Tray, as long as it's as long as it's compiled by Visual Studio and it's running in the source code folder. And that really reduces your surface area of attack quite a lot. This is just more of a statement. I'm just going through them one at a time. Analogy that we use for our customers is antivirus is like a CCTV, watching as people move around in case they do anything. And ThreatLocker is like the person who lets them in the door. I would say we're big ass bolts on the door versus a house alarm, but it's a similar analogy. And I think that's a good analogy too. So I don't know if this was for both of these solutions. So Kurt West asked, will there be any technical solutions? We'll give a link at the end of the demo. I'm sure you've got a link as well where you can schedule a demo. We also do regular demos of ThreatLocker publicly as well. So, and they get posted on our Facebook, on our YouTube and various feeds. So you can schedule one at the end though. Do you have a schedulable demo too, Eyal?
No, but we can send a link for anyone that wants to schedule a demo with us.
Yeah, we'll email them as well to everyone at the end. And somebody says, based on what I've Googled, IronScale seems like an innovative solution to fight against phishing, which is the biggest entry points for threat. Is IronScales easy to configure, and what type of companies should think about taking advantage of API-based email security solutions like IronScales?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I like the traditional solution, the MX-based solution. We are API-based, which means we are hooking into the tenant and the environment and the mailboxes. We are working very nice. We're cloud native, cloud first with the Office 365 and GWS. It's literally 2 clicks to deploy the solution. And then the solution will start the process that we call the 90 days look back. It will go back 3 months in time and just learn the environment and start profiling the mailboxes and the organization. There are no policies, no rules, nothing like that. It's self-learning, so it will learn just by itself how the organization looks like and how to protect it best. And again, for MSPs, we provide all the APIs for provisioning and licensing and all these kinds of things. The multi-tenancy, obviously, and one single pane of control for all their customers. And we're selling via a couple of distributors as well, like Backside and Climb, for MSPs that are working with them.
So I think that got through the questions. Do you have anything you want to add, Eyal, to as we close out?
No, I think for people that feel that their customers need help with a more modern API-based phishing email solution that can filter out not just the bad content, but emails with bad intent, the business email compromise out there, which again, it's a growing concern for organization. We have a lot of experience with that. Like I mentioned, we're working with 1,400 MSPs. We have more than 7,000 customers. We are working with the Office 365, with the Defenders and GWSs of the world, normally replacing the Mimecast, the Proofpoints, and the Barracudas out there. And if you want to see a demo, we're happy to show you one, obviously.
Okay. So I just want to explain what Zero Trust World is. So in February 1 through 3 in Orlando, Florida, if you like the sticky hot sunshine, actually February is the only time to come to Orlando, Florida. We have a trade show or a security conference here in Orlando. Now, what we do 3 days of basically teaching you how to secure your environment. Some of that comes in method of cool hacking. So we have labs where we teach you how to hack, just so you know what the threats are and you can show and you can demonstrate the threats to your buyers, if you like, if you're an MSP, to your customers, if you're IT department, to your board of directors, and saying, look how easy it is to steal our data. This is what we need to do. So it's a great few days of learning to hack. We got some great keynote speakers coming in as well. And we we do that 3-day event. It's basically a 3-day party where you get to learn loads of cybersecurity stuff. There was one question that came through, and I was going to answer on behalf of ThreatLocker, and I was going to ask you because I'm not sure who it was intended for. Do we have a solution for UK customers as well? So on behalf of ThreatLocker, because I'm not sure who it was intended for, ThreatLocker has offices in the US. Our headquarters is based here in Orlando, Florida, and we have our offices in Ireland, and we have presence in the UK. We have data centers in Europe and data centers in the US, and we do deal with European and UK customers. So I don't know if you want to give your answer on that too, Eyal.
Same answer. We have presence in both locations, data centers in both locations, Europe and the US. We have a team in the UK and many happy customers and MSPs as well.
Yeah, we do run 24-hour support too, 365 days a year with a 30-second response time, where you'll get an engineer on the phone with you, not some who can help you with any questions you have with ThreatLocker. But everyone, I appreciate you taking the time today. Thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your week.